Why God's bright presence seems sometimes to sleep. That's a question that has echoed through the ages. It's this haunting inquiry into the very nature of faith and doubt. And in this explainer, we're going to dive into two very, very different answers to that question. This really gets to the heart of what philosophers call the shrouded veil, or the problem of divine hiddenness. We're going to explore it, but not just as some dry theological puzzle. We're going to look at it as a deliberate design choice, like a central plot point in a much, much bigger story. So let's start with the core tension, what our source material calls the unanswered sky. I think we all get this. It's that profound, deeply human question of why sincere, honest people can look up at that very sky and feel, well, nothing. Especially in a world that believers say was created by a loving God. So what is divine hiddenness exactly? Well, it's a formal philosophical argument that kind of goes like this. Imagine a perfectly loving parent. If they knew their child was lost, wouldn't they make themselves as easy to find as possible? Of course they would. The argument says a loving God would do the same. And since God isn't obvious to everyone, some people argue that maybe, just maybe, such a God doesn't exist at all. Now, this argument is often structured with some pretty cold, hard logic, a three-step syllogism. Let's walk through it. Premise 1. If a perfectly loving God exists, then reasonable unbelief should be impossible. Makes sense, right? Premise 2. But reasonable unbelief does occur. I mean, just look at the world. Conclusion, therefore, a perfectly loving God does not exist. It's a powerful, direct challenge, no doubt about it. And you should know, this isn't just some fringe idea. Really smart philosophers have built serious cases around it. You've got J.L. Schellenberg, who focuses on what he calls non-resistant non-believers. These are people who are totally open to believing, but just aren't convinced. Others point to the huge number of non-believers, or how belief seems tied to where you're born, or even the vast stretches of prehistory where nobody seemed to believe in one God. Every single one of these points is a direct shot at the idea of a universally accessible God. Okay, so that's a really powerful case against belief. But, and this is a big but, it's all built on a specific set of assumptions about what God's role is supposed to be. Now, we're going to flip the script completely and look at the Quranic perspective. It doesn't just try to defend against this argument, it reframes the entire situation right from the get-go. And this slide just illustrates that clash of worldviews perfectly. The argument from divine hiddenness, it starts with a question about love and proof. But the Quranic premise, it starts somewhere totally different. It starts with purpose and testing. He created death and life to test you, who among you is best indeed. See, the whole goal of life is framed in a completely different way from the very beginning. This brings us to a really crucial concept, Ikhtiyar, or free will. In the Islamic worldview, this isn't just a nice idea, it's the entire foundation for moral responsibility. And here's the kicker. From this perspective, divine hiddenness isn't a problem that needs to be solved. It's actually the necessary condition to protect that very freedom. The source material puts this beautifully. If God overtly manifested, our choices would be shackled in his overwhelming sway. Just think about it for a second. If a teacher stands over your shoulder, watching every single answer you write on a test, is it really a test of what you know anymore? Not really. The argument here is that overwhelming, undeniable proof of God wouldn't invite choice, it would compel it, and that would make the choice totally meaningless. So, this leads to a new question. If the evidence isn't supposed to be overwhelming, then where is it? This section, A World Full of Signs, is all about shifting our focus from what's absent to what is. According to this worldview, absolutely everywhere. Kind of like a director's clues hidden in plain sight throughout a movie. From this perspective, the evidence is everywhere, in what the Quran calls Ayat, or signs. It says, we will show them our signs in the universe and within themselves. So the idea isn't that there's one single missing piece of the puzzle. It's that the evidence is woven into the very fabric of reality, from the stars in the night sky to the thoughts inside your own head, just waiting to be seen if you take the time to reflect. Okay, so if the signs are everywhere, how are we supposed to see them? This is where the concept of fitra comes in. The best way to think about it is like an innate spiritual compass, or maybe like pre-installed software for recognizing purpose. It's not a memory of God, but the cognitive tool everyone is born with, designed specifically to process these signs and look for their source. All right, so if we have the signs and we have the tool to see them, then what is unbelief? This is where the Quranic worldview takes a dramatic turn from the atheist argument. It redefines kufr, or unbelief, not as a passive state of not having enough evidence, but as a willful act of covering up, of actively concealing the very truth that our own innate reason, our fitra, is pointing towards. And this changes how we even think about divine love, or Al-Wadud. Remember, the first argument assumed a loving God would just give everyone overwhelming proof. But this perspective argues that God's love isn't about removing the test. It's about rewarding those who freely choose to pass it. It's an active love, one that favors freely chosen qualities like justice and patience and trust, rather than a love that makes choice impossible in the first place. And finally, the scripture itself is put on the table as a piece of rational evidence. The Quran issues a direct intellectual challenge. It says, essentially, had it been from other than Allah, they would surely have found therein much discrepancy. It's an invitation to scrutinize it, arguing that its own internal coherence is a sign of its divine origin.
So, we've now seen two starkly different ways of interpreting the exact same reality. Is God hidden or is he manifest? This final section is where we bring these two opposing views face to face for the final cut. This table really lays it all out. On one side, you have unbelief seen as this passive thing, caused by a lack of evidence. The responsibility is on God to show up. On the other side, unbelief is an active choice, a covering up of signs that are already there. And the responsibility? Well, that's squarely on us to reflect. The whole disagreement boils down to where that responsibility lies. And so, the core thesis of the Quranic response is summed up right here. So divine hiddenness, a feature, wise and grand, not a deficiency from love's unbounded hand. Simply put, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Let's go back to that director metaphor one last time. From this point of view, God's non-obviousness isn't some kind of plot hole in the story of the universe. No, it is the entire point of the story. The whole purpose is to preserve the freedom of the actor, you, to allow for a genuine, meaningful, and totally uncoerced choice. And that leaves us right here, at the final cut. According to this framework, the signs are all around us and they're inside of us. The choice of how you interpret them is entirely yours. So the ultimate question this worldview poses isn't where is God? It's what will you choose to see?